Before we begin, I thought it would be fun if everyone lets me know in the comments where they're watching this video from. And while you're down there, don't forget to subscribe. Now, let's start today's episode. Southeast Asia might not be the first place you associate with hauntings, but the region is rich in culture and tradition, giving rise to some intriguing ghost stories. You may not be familiar with the subject of our next tale, which is prevalent in India, Bangladesh, and Pakistan. It involves a demonic, malevolent entity that takes the form of a woman. It's called a churel. The churel is described as the ghost of an impurified living thing, and is also known as the tree spirit, as she tends to latch onto trees in the jungles of Asia. She allegedly takes the form of a beautiful woman, luring men she wants revenge on into the woods only to take their lives, or to take their vitality. The latter turns the men into much older beings. Churels are thought to come from women who have experienced an unnatural loss of life. This is often during pregnancy or childbirth, or from suffering at the hands of her in-laws. Often, churros will haunt the men of a certain family, as the spirit of the mistreated woman is related to them. The legend is thought to come from Persia. Now, Iran, where the truer forms from women who have lived an unsatisfactory life, or who have unfulfilled desires. Once appearing to men, again often in a jungle, the mountains, or other remote places, she removes her cloak of beauty to reveal a monstrous, gnarled appearance. The true form of the churel is a woman with a disfigured appearance. Depending on the country from which the legend originates, churros can have black tongues, no mouth at all, a face to resemble a pig, claw-like hands and fangs. This is far from the stunning appearance of a young woman, dressed all in white that the chuo allegedly shapeshifts to. According to Asian folklore, one can prevent the creation of a churel by either preventing its creation by treating a woman well during pregnancy, or by performing a series of rituals upon the body once they have passed away. In some parts of Asia, the ground where the woman passed away is purified or dug up and treated with mustard, which keeps the churel content. Failing to address this leaves the churel roaming graveyards, battlefields, mountains, and jungles across India and other South Asian countries. If you're fascinated by Unsolved Mysteries and enjoying the video so far, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up to stay updated on all our latest content. Moving on to the next mystery. The Sentinelese are widely known as the last true isolationist people in the world. However, this doesn't mean they have had no contact with the outside world. Over the past few centuries, there have been a few incidents that have provided some insight into their lives and their situation. Back in 1867, an Indian merchant ship had crash-landed on the shores near North Sentinel Island due to the massive and impossible-to-navigate reefs in the region. The survivor accounts detailed that on the third day of being on the island, the group was attacked by members of the Sentinelese tribe as they described were perfectly naked with short hair and red-painted noses, and were opening their mouths and making strange and unintelligible noises. This led people to realize that perhaps the language of the Sentinelese tribe was something much older than anything previously heard, as the noises were not common to that of any other languages in the world. Interestingly enough, this theory was confirmed when Onge-speaking people from other Andaman Islands nearby were brought along to help translate, but claimed that the language spoken by the North Sentinelese was completely unintelligible and seemed to have no connection with the Andamanese language. This led to the very early realization that the people of the North Sentinelese Island were much older than any other civilization or group of people anywhere in the world, as they did not have sounds common to that of Latin, Cyrillic, Romance, or any other form of popular and unpopular languages previously existing. Their hostile attitudes towards outsiders, along with the lack of any identifiable connection between their language and others, have further reinforced their isolationist philosophy, solidifying their status as an uncontactable tribe. Moving on to the next mystery. In 2006, Canadian scientists used infrared and laser imaging on the Mona Lisa, leading to a fascinating discovery beneath the layers of paint. They found hidden artworks, previously concealed from view, including preliminary sketches by Da Vinci. These sketches depicted the Mona Lisa in different poses, with varying hand positions and finger angles, as well as detailed features like the lace on her dress. Then in 2015, in hopes to uncover more information surrounding these hidden pieces of art, French engineer Pascal Cote used techniques of shooting out light beams at a range of different wavelengths onto the art that worked to measure the quantities of light reflected back. This allowed the researcher to then slowly peel back each layer of the painting brushstroke after brushstroke to see the many different stages of its creation. This helped to locate more than 4 separate images underneath the painted face of the Mona Lisa, including a strange and unknown painting of a much younger woman with small facial features and no smile. This has caused many to speculate the true design of the Mona Lisa and who this mysterious woman could be underneath the face of the Mona Lisa. Others believe that the painter could merely have been reusing an existing canvas or decommissioned piece as to help save money on materials and canvases rather than to start a fresh portrait on an unused canvas. It's possible that this was the case, as Leonardo da Vinci and other Italian Renaissance artists often reused canvases. However, this hasn't stopped enthusiasts from speculating about the identity of the mysterious woman in the painting and the true identity of the Mona Lisa herself. Moving on to the next mystery. The disappearance of 39-year-old Todd Hofflander, an experienced outdoorsman from the Seven Devils area of Idaho, is considered one of the most bizarre cases in recent years. It has become a widely discussed case among missing 411 investigators. On September 27, 2010, Todd Hofflander, an experienced hiker, embarked on a short 4-day hiking trip with a close friend in the Seven Devils area of Idaho. Just hours into the trip, Todd was reported missing. The area they were in was vast, open, and difficult to get lost in, with little vegetation and high elevation that made it easy for airplanes or helicopters to spot missing hikers. The terrain also consisted of exposed rock and dirt, which should have made it simple to spot their brightly colored clothing from the air. Despite these favorable conditions for a search, Todd Hofflander went missing without a trace, and despite weeks of searching, he was never found. According to Todd's hiking partner, the two men started their trip up the mountain following paved hiking trails that stretched up to the highest summit of the area. Joining the two men was also Todd's black Labrador, Ruby, who seemed playful and excited to be on the hiking trip. After hiking for several hours, Todd would complain to his hiking partner that his knee had become incredibly sore. Although it was never explained if Todd's sore knee was caused by the hike itself or was due to an old injury or disability, the hiking partner would later tell investigators that it would be due to Todd's bad knee that Todd would decide to return back downhill and meet back up with his friend at a later time at the base of the river, where the two men had decided to make camp earlier in the day. The hiking partner would also tell investigators that he didn't believe that the sore knee was a serious issue, as there had been countless times when Todd Hofflander had made comments about his knees when hiking in the past and were often nothing more than a stiffness or general discomfort. After spending several more hours at the peak of the Seven Devils Mountain, Todd's hiking partner would slowly make his way back down the mountain shortly before the sun had set. As he approached the river where the two men had promised to later meet up and establish a primitive campsite, the hiking partner quickly realized that Todd was nowhere to be found in the area. Although the hiking partner would later tell investigators that splitting up during their hiking trips was common for the two men, he would have a terrible feeling that something was far out of the ordinary, and so would quickly contact local United States Forest Services and the local county sheriff's department to conduct a missing person search for Todd Hofflander by late evening. Several dozen volunteers from the sheriff's department and agents from the United States Forest Service would spend the night combing the area for Todd Hofflander, alongside close friends and family members, yet no sign of the missing 39-year-old man or his dog Ruby were ever discovered. The use of emergency aircraft would also prove to be of little help as no sign of Todd Hofflander was reported from the skies, even with the use of advanced thermal imaging technology and night vision cameras to scan the area for any signs of body heat. It was almost as if Todd Hofflander had completely vanished from the entire region. Search and rescue volunteers would also grow increasingly concerned due to the plummeting temperatures of the mountain and the high elevation, making it difficult for even a well-insulated individual to have stayed warm through the night. It would be on the second day of Todd's disappearance that investigators would get a witness report from a passing hiker who claimed to have seen Todd Hofflander while he had been resting at the McCaffrey Cow Camp, located at the halfway point between the mountain summit and the base of the river where Todd and his hiking partner had planned to meet. According to the hiker, Todd had passed through McCaffrey Cow Camp and stayed there to rest a while before continuing on his journey. Using the McCaffrey Cow Camp as Todd's last known location, search and rescue teams would radiate outward from the spot in organized grid-like search patterns in the hopes of locating Todd or any of his belongings. Oddly enough, after another 2 weeks of searching, investigators and search and rescue volunteers were unable to find any sign of Todd, Ruby, or any of his belongings. After a total of 15 days of trying to locate the missing 39-year-old, investigators would call off the search for Todd, believing that he must have completely left the area and was most likely no longer within the national park. Several theories would soon be claimed by investigators, including the possibility that Todd had decided to purposefully abandon his family to start a new life as he left behind 2 children and his wife. Another widely accepted possibility is believed that Todd may have been attacked by a large animal, as bears are commonly found in the state and could have been responsible for his disappearance. However, even if that was the case, Todd's belongings should have been located within the area. Yet despite searching for several square miles from where Todd had last been seen, there was little to no evidence of animal attacks or locating any of Todd's items. News surrounding the missing pair would not come forward until another 3 days had passed from the termination of search efforts. According to reports, it would be on October 15th that a group of hikers passing through the area would find a black Labrador dog that would later be confirmed by Todd's wife as being Ruby. The hikers would claim to have found the dog while passing through the eastern slopes of the Seven Devils Mountain, the same area where Todd Hofflander was believed to have last been seen. In a bizarre turn of events for investigators, despite having been missing for more than 18 days, Ruby would be found in perfect health, as well as in good moods, as if she had been fed routinely while she was missing. Todd's wife would tell investigators that Todd and Ruby had always been inseparable, and that if Ruby was found in the area, then Todd must have also still been in the area. Seeing Ruby's health as a good sign for Todd's well-being, the search for Todd Hofflander would continue once more. Unfortunately for investigators and Todd's family, despite another week of searching, no sign of Todd was ever located, and the official search into the missing 39-year-old would be terminated. Todd's wife, Julie Hofflander, would spend the following weeks talking with several different news sources, begging for more volunteers to help her find her missing husband during an informal search lasting for an unknown period of time. Julie would also tell reporters that she was confused by the lack of any recovered materials. She reported that no trace of Todd was found, expressing her belief that something far stranger than a simple hiking accident or animal attack had occurred. Today, rumors of a supernatural event surround the area, as local legends suggest the Hell's Canyon wilderness, where Todd vanished, is rife with strange sightings and supernatural occurrences. Adding to the eerie nature, nearby geographic features like Devil Lake, Purgatory Lake, Devil's Throne Ridge, and Seven Devils Lake all carry names and legends tied to superstitions. Nearly 10 years after his disappearance, an update emerged. In January 2021, remains were discovered, and DNA tests confirmed they belonged to Todd Hofflander. Moving on to the next mystery. The story of human history is a complex and detailed one, unfolding over thousands of years and shaping the civilizations we recognize today. Yet, a shocking revelation now challenges our understanding of the past. Approximately 98% of human history remains shrouded in obscurity, hidden beneath the veil of time. The vast majority of human history rests in the realm of the unknown, existing only as fragmented whispers in the archaeological record and speculative theories. Our comprehension of the ancient world is primarily derived from artifacts, ruins, and inscriptions, but these remnants often offer mere glimpses into the cultures, societies, and events that define the lives of our distant ancestors. The scarcity of written records, the perishable nature of materials, and the ravages of time have collectively conspired to obscure the intricate narratives of countless civilizations. Several factors contribute to the immense historical gaps that mark our understanding of the past. One of the most significant challenges lies in the lack of written records from preliterate societies. In the absence of written language, societies relied on oral traditions to pass down their knowledge and stories, leaving little trace for modern historians to decipher. Moreover, the materials used for early writing were often perishable, such as papyrus or wood, rendering them susceptible to decay over time. Natural disasters and conflict have also played a pivotal role in erasing entire chapters of human history. Cataclysmic events like volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, and floods have submerged ancient settlements and destroyed valuable records. Additionally, the deliberate destruction of cultural heritage during times of conflict or conquest has further contributed to the loss of historical knowledge. The scarcity of historical information carries profound implications for our understanding of human development, societal evolution, and cultural dynamics. The missing epics leave us bereft of insights into the complexities of governance, technology, belief systems, and artistic expression that shaped the trajectory of humanity. The lost civilizations could hold the keys to understanding the roots of modern societal challenges and the solutions that were developed and subsequently forgotten. Furthermore, the absence of this vast historical wealth deprives us of a sense of continuity and connection with our distant past. It's like a jigsaw puzzle with countless missing pieces, creating gaps in our shared identity and our understanding of our origins. Moving on to the next mystery. Tyrannosaurus rex, one of the largest known carnivorous dinosaurs, is also the most widely recognized, thanks to its immense media exposure. Its popularity has led to countless books, movies, TV shows, and video games. What's truly remarkable, however, is how much of what was once accepted as fact has recently been challenged, and how much more is still being uncovered. For years, paleontologists argued about whether T-Rex was a savage killer or a scavenger. That is, did it actively hunt its food? Or did it tuck into carcasses of dinosaurs that already died from old age or disease? Today, this controversy seems rather quaint, as there's no reason T-Rex couldn't have pursued both behaviors at the same time, as would any carnivore that wanted to avoid starvation. We all know that dinosaurs evolved into birds, and that some carnivorous dinosaurs, especially raptors, were covered in feathers. Hence, some paleontologists believe all tyrannosaurs, including T-Rex, must have been covered in feathers at some point during their life cycles, most likely when they first hatched out of eggs. But while these discoveries are interesting, it has nothing on a recent discovery that shocked paleontologists. The controversial discovery of 68 million yards of tissue from the bones of a Tyrannosaurus rex. This discovery left people with many questions. According to new research, iron in the dinosaur's body preserved the tissues before it could decay. The research, headed by Mary Sweetshires, a molecular paleontologist at North Carolina State University, explains how proteins, and possibly even DNA, can survive millennia. She and her colleagues first raised this question in 2005, when they found this seemingly impossible. Soft tissue preserved inside the leg of an adolescent Tyrannosaurus rex unearthed in Montana. The find was also controversial because scientists have thought that proteins that make up soft tissue should degrade in less than 1 million years in the best conditions. In most cases, microbes feast on the dead animal's soft tissue, destroying it within weeks. Dinosaurs' iron-rich blood combined with a good environment for fossilization may explain the amazing existence of soft tissue from the Cretaceous, a period that lasted from around 65 million to 145 million years ago. The specimens Mary works with, including skin, shows evidence of excellent preservation. The bones of these various specimens are articulated, not scattered, suggesting they were buried quickly. They were also buried in sandstone, which is porous and may wick away bacteria and reactivate enzymes that would otherwise degrade the bone. Many are questioning why and how the blood vessels are still visible. The discovery is astonishing, as no one ever expected soft dinosaur tissue to survive. As any textbook explains, when an animal dies, soft tissues like blood vessels, muscle, and skin decay and vanish over time, while hard tissues like bone may slowly absorb minerals from the surroundings and eventually become fossils. Moving on to the next mystery. When the Dead Sea Scrolls were first discovered scattered across 12 different caves in the region, many assumed it was the complete collection. For years, no evidence of other caves or additional artifacts surfaced. Recently, however, back in late 2017, a new Dead Sea Scrolls cave was located, making it the 13th cave to house these strange artifacts. Unfortunately, the find came all too late, as it appears that looters and tomb raiders more than took the entire collection, leaving behind nothing more than a few black pieces of parchment and far less valuable artifacts. Due to this discovery, a more substantial budget and funding has been provided to the team to survey many other landmarks and caves in the region to uncover further missing artifacts. The fund was provided as part of a larger project known as the Israel Antiquities Authority, as they are known as the Israel Antiquities Authority, as they are racing to identify any further caves in the Judean desert that may contain archaeological remains before several other looters operating in the area find them. Given that these scrolls contain unaltered original versions of biblical history, along with additional stories excluded from sacred texts, they could hold crucial secrets about religious traditions, ancient histories, and long-lost biblical knowledge. Moving on to the next mystery. Michelle Whitaker, known as Shelley to her friends and family, disappeared in August 2002. A waitress by profession, Michelle had been arrested twice for drink driving in South Carolina but was released each time. These incidents created tension between her and her family, particularly straining her relationship with her mother. She was last seen trying to get a ride from a truck stop in Spartanburg. In 2005, an anonymous letter made its way to the police, stating that Michelle had been brutally attacked and that her body had been taken to Landrum. This, however, remained unconfirmed throughout the duration of the case. Jonathan Vick was a potential suspect for the attack and taking the life of both Michelle and Heather Sellers, his girlfriend. In 2006, he was also charged for taking the life of Dana Satterfield back in 1995. Jonathan Vick is also a suspect for taking the life of two other unsolved attacks, which led to the victims losing their lives. However, his involvement with Michelle was only ever speculated and never confirmed. Michelle continued to be a missing person after his arrest, and the case went cold for years afterwards. The police checked her credit card and social security number reports, often with no luck. A miracle occurred in 2008 when Michelle was found alive and living in Oregon. One of Michelle's neighbors recognized her picture on a missing persons database and contacted the South Carolina police. This led to an emotional reunion with her family, who had begun to lose hope of ever finding her. Michelle explained that her previous life had become too troubled, and she had felt the need to leave and start over. Moving on to the next mystery. North Sentinel Island seems to be a living relic from ancient times, preserving the early days of humanity. Many researchers and evolutionary theorists believe the island could harbor species long thought to be extinct, offering a unique, isolated environment filled with valuable insights into prehistoric conditions, as well as flora and fauna that may no longer exist anywhere else on Earth. Understanding more about the island and the information it provides is complicated, however, by its inhabitants. Oddly enough, the North Sentinel tribe is similar to that of our ancient ancestors lost in time, as they appear to not have even left the Stone Age and are believed to have inhabited the region for more than 6,000 years. A time span that is more than 50,000 years older than the first human civilizations to have formed from anywhere in the world. Additionally, given their hostilities against any other individuals of whom attempt to inhabit or visit the region, the North Sentinelese people have remained the most isolated humans in the history of the world, almost as if their island is a pocket into the distant past unchanged by time, technology, or innovation. Interestingly enough, during the encounter of 1981, it appears that their lack of innovation changed and their access to new resources has seen a shift in their overall mentality of that of the outside world. In addition to this, the Sentinelese tribe could provide invaluable insights into the genetic traits of early humans, shedding light on long-debated theories surrounding evolution, adaptation, and the missing link between us and the natural world. However, due to their isolation, it is feared that any contact with the outside world could lead to their extinction, as they would be vulnerable to new pathogens and diseases their immune systems are not equipped to handle. Moving on to the next mystery. The next Native American legend we'll explore centers around the existence of cannibals in a small cave near Humboldt Sink, Nevada, known as Lovelock Cave. Stretching about 150 feet in length, the cave is said to have once been home to 10-foot-tall, red-haired giants who terrorized and ate humans from nearby communities. The giants, known as Satika, were deeply feared by the Paiute Indians. The Paiute Indians eliminated the giants by trapping them inside the caves and funneling smoke inside until they passed away. Lovelock Cave, in which they lived, has since been a huge archaeological site and home to the discovery of over 10,000 artifacts. The University of California and its anthropologists went in and discovered tons of unique artifacts, like baskets, finely crafted sagebrushes, knives, and other tools. They also found human bones, some of which were missing the marrow that had been dug out. This increased the truth of cannibalistic speculations, and that the humans living within the cave ate other humans. Researchers claimed that most of the human bones remained untouched, and the bones that were missing marrow and sported knife marks might have been done out of necessity or famine and not a regular diet. The anthropologist, Llewellyn L. Loud, was in charge of the Lovelock Cave expeditions when he and his team discovered nearly 10,000 different artifacts. It took him many years of research and work before he could completely publish a full report of the findings. That being said, none of his findings directly proved the existence of 10 feet tall beings, and any human bones found were of the regular size for the time period. The cave was not easy to explore as it suffered from a collapse in roughly the year 440 BC, which led to the destruction of numerous access points. This likely influenced the residents of the cave to leave and find a home elsewhere. The cave's new inhabitants, primarily bats, contributed to a significant buildup of guano that covered the ground and any artifacts. Since then, Lovelock Cave has been the focus of numerous expeditions by various research organizations, yet none have found scientific evidence to support the existence of 10-foot-tall giants. Moving on to the next mystery. No one expected plastic to be falling from the sky, but that's exactly what a team of researchers from the United States Geological Survey discovered while analyzing rainwater samples in the Rocky Mountains. The team was originally studying nitrogen pollution, but their findings revealed something even more alarming. The analysts revealed that microplastic was found in over 90% of the samples that were collected from 8 different sites throughout Denver and Boulder, Colorado. And while microplastics in rainwater is not an unusual or unique occurrence, it was previously thought that most instances of contamination were limited to urban areas with much higher pollution rates. However, many of these recent samples were taken from locations that were very rural and were not expected to contain the levels of microplastics that they did. The research team stated in the report that more plastic fibers were observed in samples from urban sites than from remote mountainous sites. However, frequent observation of plastic fibers in washout samples from the remote Site C098 at Lochvalen Rocky Mountain National Park suggests that wet disposition of plastic is ubiquitous and not just an urban condition. The Site C098 that is referenced in the Rocky Mountains is from a rarely frequented location over 3,000 meters above sea level, where it was thought that the likelihood of plastic contamination would be low. After further analysis of the plastics, it seems that most of the contamination is from thin strands resembling synthetic fibers from many clothes and other fabrics. The plastics were noted in a variable rainbow of colors, from blue to red, purple, green, and even silver. Although these microscopic particles are only visible under at least 20 times magnification and may not seem like much, the fact of the matter is that millions of tons of these microplastics make their way into our oceans and ecosystems every year, and some estimate that we consume over 70,000 microplastic particles a year at the bare minimum. These recent results confirm that there is undoubtedly much more plastic that exists unsuspected within our world, and determining the extent of the potential damages is critical in assessing the state of the pollution crisis, both visible and microscopic. Because these microplastics were discovered in areas where they were totally unanticipated, the researchers who were part of the team were able to conclude that it might be quite literally raining plastic, and thus affecting even the rural and unpopulated ecosystems much more than scientists had anticipated. Since the original study was only designed to analyze nitrogen pollution, the discovery of microplastic pollution came as an unexpected shock. This has highlighted the need for a much more thorough investigation to understand the potential implications of this finding for global microplastic contamination. Moving on to the next mystery. After spending the evening out, 24-year-old Beverly Lanfer returned to her newly shared apartment at around 1:30 a.m. on July 20th, 1971. She was ready to call it a night after enjoying the vibrant nightlife of Burlington, Vermont, a lively college town known for its close-knit community. However, as soon as she arrived home, she noticed something unsettling. Their shared bedroom door, which had recently been decorated and unpacked after their move, was ajar. Beverly distinctly remembered closing it to avoid disturbing her 24-year-old roommate, Rita Curran, a second-grade teacher at Milton Elementary School, who was on summer break. Rita had declined multiple invitations from her 3 other roommates to go out that night, preferring to enjoy some quiet time alone. This was her first time living away from her parents, and Beverly wanted to respect her space. But when Beverly stepped inside their room, she made a horrifying discovery. Rita was lying lifeless on the floor, her body bruised and her face battered. Shocked, Beverly immediately alerted their 2 other housemates, who had been unaware that anything was amiss in the second bedroom. At the time, 911 was still a relatively new emergency number, having only been established 3 years earlier, so Beverly did not call the police right away. Instead, she used a phone operator to contact the emergency room at a local hospital. When she informed the nurse on the line that she believed her roommate was dead, the hospital quickly notified the local ambulance dispatch to respond to the scene. The ambulance team from the Burlington Fire Department arrived at 17 Brooks Avenue in response to a medical distress call, and they immediately requested police presence since they believed a heinous crime had occurred. Along with paramedics, Officer Richard Garrow of the Burlington Police Department responded. The police officer confirmed that Rita had, regrettably, passed away by the time they arrived, and the entire apartment was now the scene of a homicide rather than a medical emergency. The cop asked for additional help over the phone to his lieutenant. He was told to lock the area and keep the victim's room closed off from the other residents while he waited for help. In addition to Beverly, the victim's other roommates who were present at the incident were Carrie Duane, 19, and Paul Robinson, 23, who had recently started dating. Rita and her roommates lived in a 3-story duplex apartment building. The first-floor apartment, which was accessed from the left side of the building, had the address 17 Brooks Avenue. The second and third floors, which had 2 apartments each, were represented by the address 15 Brooks Avenue and were accessed from the right side. Rita and Beverly's bedroom was located down the short corridor behind the other, while Carrie and Paul's bedroom was located directly off the living room. Officer Garrow was ordered to canvass the neighborhood to see if anyone had heard anything as he remained stationed at the door until 7 a.m., when investigators arrived on the site to start their formal investigation. Officer Garrow went to the 3rd level and spoke with 31-year-old William DeRuse and his new wife, Michelle DeRuse, after he was unable to get in touch with anyone on the 2nd floor. Michelle informed Officer Garrow that until she noticed the police cars, she had neither heard nor seen anything and had no idea that anything sinister was happening. When questioned further, Mrs. DeRue indicated that she had been up since around 1 in the morning and that she had not heard any strange sounds, despite the couple's adamant claims to the contrary. William, her spouse, made the same comment. After being questioned, other nearby witnesses remained silent. Soon later, at around 4:20 a.m., the medical examiner doctor was joined by police. When Harris composed his first report, he mentioned how provocatively the body had been arranged. When Rita was found, she was on her back, her legs wide and her arms outstretched, forming an X shape. She had suffered from severe head trauma, mostly on her left side, leaving her with multiple dried blood-stained cuts and contusions. Multiple blunt force injuries to the face and head were evident. Detectives saw that Rita's hair was strewn all over her head, and that torn hair strands were visible on the floor nearby, as if they had been torn from her scalp during the assault. Rita had severe bruises on the insides of both her right and left legs, as well as one above her right knee, according to the medical examiner. An autopsy later on would determine that the cause of death was manual strangulation asphyxia. It was also discovered that the murderer had recently injured and bruised her lower body, suggesting that she had also been sexually attacked. According to toxicity studies, she had no alcohol in her bloodstream. Rita was wearing a house coat with buttons on it that had been ripped apart at the front during the struggle, leaving several buttons missing and strewn all over the floor. In order to preserve the physical relics on the victim's hands and arms, the housecoat was severed from the body. Rita's nightgown was ripped open from front to back, with the lower portion located in the closet doorway and the upper portion wrapped under her shoulder and back. Her underwear was torn from her corpse and discovered under her left leg, together with an unidentified paper bag. Moreover, an afghan, a bedspread, and a white bedsheet were placed underneath her and knotted around her left leg. The handmade afghan blanket and the bleeding sheet and bedspread were bagged by the police. They discovered that Rita had one long strand of hair in her right hand and several strands in her left. In addition, they collected several hair strands off Rita's head for preliminary comparison and bagged the hair that was discovered on the ground. Rita's right elbow had a Lark cigarette but below it, which was discovered when her body was examined. There were indications on this cigarette that it had been abandoned and spontaneously burned out. It lay buried deep in its own ash. Later, blood samples were extracted from a section of the flooring by crime scene technicians. Rita, who was always well-groomed and put together, had worn hair curlers to bed in anticipation of the following day, according to Beverly, who reported this to the police. In addition to working part-time as a maid at Colonial Motor Inn, she was enrolled in summer graduate studies at the nearby University of Vermont. Rita, trying to be more social, had joined a neighborhood barbershop quartet and was practicing with them until roughly 10 o'clock every day, just like she had on July 19th before heading home and into her final bed. The curlers Rita had painstakingly applied were discovered thrown in the room's corner close to the stereo. There were numerous broken and damaged hair strands in the curlers, which led the detectives to conclude that the curlers had been roughly pulled from her head. Police speculated that during the attack, the killer, whose motive was unknown, yanked Rita's hair curlers off of her head and hurled them into the corner. The stereo belonging to the roommate was upside down in the rear left corner, close to the speakers and the broken hair curlers. The drapes that had been hanging in the window near the same part of the room where the hair rollers were discovered with such pride had been pulled off their rod and were now resting on the stereo. On the otherwise spotless floor, there was also a noticeable amount of grime. To compare the dirt on the victim's room floor with the dirt in the shared residence's cellar, a sample of the latter was collected. Furthermore, a sizable piece of wood that they thought contained blood was taken from the bedroom door. The hard flooring was also examined by police for fingerprints. Rita's roommates all stated that after checking their acquaintance, nothing further was touched, but as per police protocol, their prints were obediently obtained for exclusionary purposes. Beverly knew their shared room well, and she estimated that the bed had been pushed about a foot towards the left wall. Based on this information, the detectives concluded that the most of the altercation had place on the right side of the bed. Beverly had a desk on the right wall, and a shared dresser was on the other side. But nothing interesting turned up on either. On the door leading out of the room, blood was found. There was apparent blood on the exterior of the kitchen door, but other than that, there were no disturbances in the living room, kitchen, or bathroom areas where Paul and Carrie had been. There were no indications of trespassing or fighting in the shared rear yard and porch area of the duplex. On the lower panel and top center of the rear door, however, blood drippings were discovered by the police. It was believed that this blood belonged to the murderer, who was most likely bleeding out as he fled after suffering an injury during the attack. When police looked into the right side driveway, they couldn't find any footprints in the sand, which would have meant that no one had entered since the precipitation the night before. No footprints or other evidence was found in the grassy area of the driveway. The cobwebs were still hanging from the cellar windows, suggesting that they had not been opened. It had been some time since anyone had used the back entrance to the cellar, and investigators couldn't determine whether someone had recently been in the backyard, as the grass showed no clear signs of disturbance. When officers examined the left side of the house, they found no obvious point of entry. While the bedroom window near the front door was unlocked, it was also extremely difficult to open, making it unlikely that the intruder had entered that way. The storm door was ajar, while the back door was closed but unlocked. Investigators then noticed a gray wastebasket near the porch and shed, which had been knocked over and appeared to have been stepped on. Its contents were scattered across the floor. Nearby, they found a white wastebasket, which was completely empty. This led them to speculate whether the suspect had used the baskets as a way to peek into the windows, possibly to check if anyone was inside. As the crime scene was being processed, roommate Paul Robinson returned to the apartment around 6:00 a.m. to speak with the police and provide any additional details that could assist in the investigation. He clarified that the numerous trash cans that had been discovered toppled had been left outside on the back porch the previous evening with the intention of emptying them later. With a guilty smile, he said that he had also propped up their storm door with the wastebasket for unidentified reasons. He expressed concern that this could have made the killer's entrance easier. He continued, nevertheless, by stating that it was the roommate's common understanding that all apartment doors remained unlocked. He claimed throughout the chat that all of the housemates were close, but he didn't know that Rita or Beverly smoked cigarettes. Paul was positive that neither he nor Carrie had ever smoked Lark's brand, even though he and Carrie admitted to occasionally smoking Winston's or Benson & Hodges. Because such a brand of cigarette is unique, this was a question that was raised several times. Investigators were hoping that such an oddity might identify the assailant. Paul acknowledged that the flat was vulnerable since the front door's chain lock was broken and has been for a while when asked about other people's access. With evident enthusiasm and anxiety that their own behaviors might have contributed to the security breach, he readily acknowledged all of this. Paul was questioned by detectives to get more information about his past activities with his girlfriend. After some time, Paul was released without being questioned further because his account corroborated the information in his signed statement and the statements of his roommates, who were interviewed separately in accordance with police protocol, which states that suspects should not be questioned together to prevent cooperative deception. Carrie reported that evening, at 7:30 p.m., Paul picked her up from work. They then drove around for a while, coming home to change clothes, and then going again at about 8:50 p.m. for dinner at Harbor Hideaway. At approximately 11:15 p.m., they called Rita's roommate Beverly from that pub and invited her over for a drink. Rita was sleeping in their shared room, according to Beverly, so she walked out without waking her and proceeded to the pub with the others. At 11:20 p.m., Beverly departed from the flat. The last person to saw Rita alive was her. After Beverly arrived at Harbor Hideaway for about an hour, Paul mentioned that he was exhausted and that he and Carrie were going home to sleep. They remember returning to the apartment at 12:30 a.m. and spending some time in the living room before going to their bedroom to spend the night. Although they claimed not to have seen anything strange, they did note that Rita and Beverly's room door was slightly ajar, about 12 inches. Since Rita was sleeping, Beverly claims she closed the door on her way out of courtesy. Based on this scenario, investigators came to the conclusion that Rita was murdered between around 11:20 p.m. and 12:30 a.m., during the 70 minutes that passed between Beverly's departure and Paul and Carrie's return home. According to detectives, Rita's roommates' comings and goings were natural. Thus, there were no preparations for the killer to utilize to trap her. Rita was left alone for just 70 minutes, which meant that it was unlikely that the culprit happened to happen upon the victim by accident. It took that long to go home. They believed that the crime was more likely to have been committed by someone who lived close by and was aware of the residents' driving habits and routines, making it possible to keep track of who was coming and departing. Despite the thin connection, detectives investigated all the guys named in the initial allegations because they thought Reardon knew the criminal. Re-examining the data, investigators found that William DeRuse, 31, lived on the third floor of Rita's apartment and had at least 3 prior contacts with the police on unrelated matters. He and his spouse exchanged an alibi, saying they were both at home and had not heard or seen anything, despite the fact that he had also been referenced multiple times throughout the neighborhood canvas. William DeRuiz was also suggested as a potential person of interest 9 days after the murder, on July 28. The confidential informant claimed that the newlywed who had only been married for 3 weeks was, quote, capable of committing a violent act. Authorities found it interesting that William's wife was 24 years old, Rita's age. Despite the informant's accusation and William's close vicinity to the crime site, detectives were unable to locate any evidence connecting the spouse to the scene, even though the 2 women had no prior history of interaction. William was never formally examined as a person of interest because there were no concrete damning artifacts, and blood analysis and DNA fingerprinting were not included in investigative efforts until 1980. Cold case status would shortly set in. A team of cold case investigators investigated Rita's murder more than 40 years later with the goal of using new DNA technology to identify a potential culprit. As is becoming more and more common, carefully maintained artifacts for future generations to interpret and decode served as the evidence that ultimately identified the murderer. The task team was forced to separate the physical evidence into two categories due to the high cost of the testing required to separate and identify the artifacts from the crime scene. The items in Group 1 are the most likely to yield DNA results. A piece of linoleum with bloodstains, Rita's underwear, a portion of her nightgown, the housecoat, 2 pieces of wood, and 2 cloth drawstrings from the housecoat she wore both during and after the attack were among the encouraging pieces of evidence. While the blood samples from 1971 were too diluted and degraded to create profiles, the distinct presence of the used Lark cigarette would prove to be the break detectives needed. Group 2 contained items that were less likely to provide a complete suspect DNA profile, mainly the hair curlers and the rest of the bedding. In 2014, the Chief Medical Examiner's Office in New York City received samples of the cigarette butt, fingernail scrapings, and bodily fluid slides taken during Rita's autopsy for DNA analysis. Cold case investigators learned of the recovery of a male DNA profile from the cigarette, but around the end of October 2014. It was added to the databases of OCME, the NDIS, and the SDIS when it was determined to be appropriate for comparison. It had also been added to the CODIS system, according to confirmation from the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner in New York. There was not enough DNA present on 4 of the 8 tested slides to allow for testing. For unknown reasons, possibly financial, the fingernail scrapings were not examined. Ultimately, a new lead was found in 2019 during the reinvestigation of an almost half-century-old cold case. Witness testimonies and the case file follow-up led police to conclude that William DeRouse should be added to the suspect pool so they could compare DNA samples from the cigarette, but due to his close proximity to the murder and tenuous alibi. Now that the known DNA profile was available, a large number of suspects were evaluated and eliminated via CODIS exclusion, direct comparison, or familial comparison. Prior to the arrival of the first detective, Rita's roommate Paul Robinson and other first responders were also compared to the cigarette sample. Everyone was left out. They even ran Ted Bundy's DNA profile against the cigarette located under Rita's arm. Even though Bundy's method of operation differed from Rita's indoor attack, it was impossible to overlook his relentless hold on American women in the 1970s. And for many years, some people suspected that Rita was one of his early victims. Rita's sister even sent a letter to Bundy's prison on Florida's death row, inquiring as to whether or not he had murdered her sister. The FBI responded by telling her that Bundy had chosen not to admit or deny his involvement. When FBI officials questioned Bundy on the eve of his execution in 1989, he categorically denied any participation in the case. His DNA was later compared to Rita's bedroom profile, but there was no match. To create the DNA profile from the cigarette butt, the cold case detectives collaborated with top genome sequencing company DNA Labs. In 2022, they sent the DNA profile and the cigarette butt to Parabon Nano Labs, where it was successfully sequenced and uploaded to Family Tree DNA and GEDmatch for genetic genealogy forensics. William DeRouse was included on the list of suspects that Parabon Nanolab officials requested in August 2022 because of the information uncovered in the 2019 investigation update. The genetic makeup of his family was contrasted with that of the sample. The findings showed that Rita's upstairs neighbor had a high confidence match with DNA ties to both his paternal and maternal sides of the family. Eventually, the team was able to confirm a familial relationship by doing additional DNA tests against Douglas McGinney, the surviving half-brother. The confirmation yielded a certainty of 100%. To find out if the remaining housemates knew William or his wife Michelle at the time, investigators conducted follow-up interviews with them. Police were saddened to discover that Beverly Lanford had gone away and never heard of any new case developments, even though Paul and Carrie had been found and remembered having no substantial interactions with the upstairs neighbor. Detectives traveled to Oregon in September 2022 to meet with William's ex-wife, Michelle, who was known by her legal name at the time of the crime, but is now known as Kylie Nagarjawan. She was reminded, now in her mid-70s, that she and William had first met in 1970, less than 2 years before to the murder. Although she acknowledged that she didn't know as much as she should have about her husband, she remembered that he had told her that he had served 2 to 3 years in prison for armed robbery, the longest sentence he had ever received. Only 2 weeks had passed since the couple's marriage to their downstairs neighbor's house. The ex-wife of William claims she has no memory of ever knowing or even seeing the neighbors. She claims she didn't recognize Rita when shown a picture of her. She says that although William was bossy and overly protective, he wanted her to get pregnant as soon as possible. However, the now elderly woman remembered almost warmly that William's main objective was to operate a barbershop and have a big family with her. She insisted that the man who is now believed to have fatally strangled a young teacher had never physically abused her and that she had never been terrified of him. She said that since he was a devout Buddhist and a teetotaler, such a change in personality could not be explained by drink or drugs. In 1971, she recalled seeing police officers at the flat. She claims that the morning following the murder, before going door to door, her new husband William warned her not to bring up the fact that he wasn't home since the police might try to incriminate him due to his earlier criminal record. She claims that the two got into a fight the night of the murder, but she was unable to recall the specifics of the argument. Contrary to her first and persistent public assertion, she acknowledged that her then-husband had actually briefly left their flat during a period of time when Rita's housemates were also absent. She remembers that William departed for what he claimed to be a cool-down walk, but upon his return, he warned his wife not to mention that he had left the house at all, claiming that the police would go after him due to his criminal history. She does not provide a reason other than spousal loyalty for her decision to withhold such important and relevant facts. She remembers that she might have slept off while William was gone and didn't know how long he had been gone. She slept next to him later that night and noticed he slept in later than normal the following morning, but she did not remember anything unusual. She was also unable to recall what he had on that night or whether he had shed any clothes. She claimed that she would have called the police if she had been confident that William had been involved. She later acknowledges, though, that given their chat, it's possible she would have provided quotation coverage for her new spouse in any subsequent interviews. She acknowledges that she did consider the possibility that her new husband was the one who perpetrated the horrible act, but she claims she never asked him directly and assumed he had no motive to do it. She mentioned that although she didn't smoke, he did, but she couldn't remember the brand. William moved to Thailand abruptly not long after the murder. When asked why William moved to Thailand without her, the ex-wife was perplexed and suggested that perhaps they didn't have enough money. The couple had an arrangement that they would eventually move to Thailand together. She should have seen red signals when it came to his departure from the nation and the fact that she was already skeptical of his nightly walk, according to critics of her blissful ignorance. She claims that a few months after the murder, in March 1972, she followed William to Thailand. William, according to her, was a Buddhist monk residing at a monastery at that point. She remembers that finally he lost his monastic title, and that the couple went on a short trip that lasted a few weeks after he lost his religious standing. William was eventually readmitted as a monk and his wife converted to nunhood. Consequently, their marriage disintegrated due to stringent relationship requirements. William asked her for financial support throughout his travels, but she turned him down, so they didn't speak or interact again. They were officially divorced in absentia because she was unable to get William's signature on their divorce papers. To resolve the issue, she hired a divorce lawyer. She told officers again at the end of the interview that she could not remember ever talking to her neighbors, much less having them into her flat. Rita became quite emotional, according to the cops, after seeing photos of herself and her roommates from the time of the murder. Subsequently, investigators took a plane to Colorado to meet Sarah Hepting, the third wife of William DeRue, and her spouse. 3 years after Rita's death, in July 1974, Sarah recalls moving to San Francisco, California, when she first met William DeRue. Paradoxically, he showed interest in her and lived next door in her apartment building. He had stated that he had been married before and that he had been to Thailand, but he never gave an explanation for his departure, nor did he discuss his family history or whether he had children. According to Sarah, they both identified as hippies. On November 19, 1974, they were married, but at the time, Sarah acknowledged that she was uneasy and unsure about the exclusivity of their relationship. William was generally well-mannered, according to Sarah, but she did mention a few concerning instances. For example, one day, when a mutual acquaintance dropped by, William pulled out a big pocket knife and stabbed the man in the side without warning. After Sarah brought the injured person to the hospital, William was placed under arrest. He went back home the next day, and like nothing had happened. He even asked if he had actually stabbed Sarah, to which she replied that he had actually stabbed their friend. William showed no regret for the incident, and they never talked about it again. Another time, when they'd been drinking, he'd almost choked Sarah senseless. Sarah couldn't remember how their argument started. William acquired an AR-15 at some point in 1976, and Sarah thought he was arrested by the federal government for obtaining one of these weapons. As a result, he was missing for almost a week. But unlike the past incidents, William never talked to her about this one. Sarah could not remember his ever having mentioned Vermont as his home. She claims that despite his unpredictable nature, she was drawn to him since he was a highly powerful guru with the capacity to exert control over others. Sarah remembered William smoking cigarettes, but she couldn't remember which brand he smoked. She acknowledged that they occasionally went out, but their limited funds kept them from buying strong narcotics. She also notes that during their relationship, William drank a lot of alcohol, and she surmises that he also frequently took Thorazine. Adults with specific mental health disorders can be treated with Thorazine. It can benefit those exhibiting symptoms like agitation, delusions, or hallucinations. Thorazine improves mental health by altering the chemical equilibrium in the brain. Yet, if dosage is not taken correctly, the opposite effect may occur, causing William to act irrationally and boldly. When Sarah discovered William was having an affair in 1978, she decided to break up with him. She moved and began living with a new partner in a matter of months. She remembers William acting suspiciously when he unexpectedly showed up at her house one day. Sarah claims that because she didn't know how he got her new address, she felt uncomfortable. Fortunately for her, he moved on the next day and she didn't see him again. In 1986, William overdosed severely on morphine and died in San Francisco. His body was incinerated, leaving no biological evidence that could be tested. By the time his guilt was publicly revealed, he would have been 83 years old. Instead of facing criminal charges for his horrific crimes, he was allowed to die on his own terms, escaping the justice system entirely. Although Rita's surviving family and friends had long hoped for a trial and conviction, they understood that forensic genetic testing remains a rare and exclusive tool, often leaving families without clear answers. Despite this, they found solace in the closure provided by cold case detectives, who finally uncovered the truth after decades of searching. Rita Patricia Curran is remembered for her grace and patience, as well as her passion for teaching. Students and colleagues alike described her as the ideal teacher, someone always willing to help others. When her killer's identity was officially revealed in late February 2023, Rita would have been 76 years old. Born in the summer of 1947, her life was tragically cut short in the summer of 1971. After more than 50 years, Vermont's oldest cold case was finally solved, bringing long-awaited answers to those who had never stopped seeking justice. Moving on to the next mystery. Since ancient times, when early humans first observed the unique presence of Mars in the sky, we have always sensed that there is something special about the planet. Despite being much smaller than Earth, Mars is the most Earth-like planet in our solar system, with geological features such as polar ice caps and what appear to be ancient, now dry riverbeds. But does life exist on Mars? Although some scientists have speculated that Mars meteorites may contain fossils of ancient Martian bacteria-like life forms, there is still no conclusive evidence that life has ever existed, or currently exists, on Mars. However, that does not rule out the possibility there was once life on Mars. Although there is no conclusive evidence, there are some tantalizing photos that were sent back from Mars that may raise some eyebrows. This photo taken by the Mars Global Surveyor looks quite like the aerial photos of an Earth desert dotted with sharp growth. But these sand dunes are in the southern hemisphere of Mars. A Hungarian research team which has been analyzing the photos has concluded the black dots are indeed living organisms. Here is one of the most peculiar craters on Mars. Taken by the Mars Global Surveyor, the photo clearly shows a normal-looking crater with something extraordinary-looking inside. Off-center is a dome-like structure that appears to have a golf ball-like texture. Some have pointed out that it looks like a perfect circle, with others saying it doesn't look natural. More intriguing, this stone stands very near what looks like a system of tunnels. The Earth's history has seen a number of mass extinctions, but the most well-known happened 65 million years ago during the Cretaceous period, with the death of around 70% of all species. The most common theory for the demise of the dinosaurs is that a large asteroid struck in Mexico, forming a 240-kilometer-wide crater. The resulting atmospheric debris blocked out the sun, creating a nuclear winter, which killed plants, then plant-eaters, and finally meat-eaters. Those dismissing the theory claim that smaller reptiles, like turtles, alligators, and crocodiles, would have been harmed. Conspiracy theorists have identified what they claim to be a skull on the surface of Mars. Paranormal investigators describe it as being the skull of a herbivorous dinosaur. They even labeled the image, marking out significant parts of the skull, such as teeth, jaw, and a nasal cavity. This is another photo which has been circling the Mars Curiosity forums and shows what appears to be a fossilized spine sticking out the ground. So what are we seeing? First of all, some have suggested that the pictures we see on NASA's website are not even taken by the Curiosity and Opportunity rovers. One of the supposed locations where NASA is playing around with these rovers is Devon Island, Canada. It's worth noting that Devon Island is the largest uninhabited island on Earth, which seems like a pretty good location for a fake Martian photo shoot. NASA, based in Devon Island, Canada, even without the color filters, seems strikingly similar to Mars. But this is just speculation, and scientists say these theories are false. The brain has evolved to be able to distinguish faces and other significant objects in crowds and within the environment. This phenomenon is known as pareidolia, where humans tend to see familiar patterns, like faces or shapes, in random or ambiguous images, often enriching our imagination by perceiving things that aren't actually there. But what do you think these anomalies on Mars are? Could they be natural formations? Or is there something more to these strange images? Moving on to the next mystery. When most people think of San Diego, they envision beaches, perfect weather, and cultural landmarks. However, for those intrigued by the paranormal, San Diego's rich and eerie history, haunted locations, spiritual encounters, and unexplained phenomena lead them to one place above all: the Whaley House, often regarded as the most haunted spot in the city. While the story of the Whaley House's origins may seem as simple and innocent as a family's history, the truth is many believe this house was destined to be haunted before it is even built. The property was the site of one of the town's most famous public executions, that of the hanging of the infamous thief Yankee Jim Robinson. But Thomas Whaley was not daunted by this fact, and in 1855 purchased the land and began construction of what would be his family home. The house was a beautiful example of Greek Revival architecture. Thomas, his wife Anna, and their 3 children moved into the house in 1857, and within a few months opened a general store inside the residence. It wasn't long after the Whaley family moved into the home that sadness and despair were thrust upon them. First, their young son Thomas, who was only 18 months old, died of scarlet fever inside the house. Then a few months later, a father rage was in the home, destroying the general store. Soon after, Thomas decided to move the family to San Francisco. Several years later, in 1868, the Whaley family, which now included Thomas, his wife, and their 5 children, returned to the home. Once the family returned, the Whaley house was again bustling with activity. It became the headquarters for the city courthouse, a general store, and more. But in 1870, local merchants began to move to the newly established new town, abandoning Old Town and leaving it eerily quiet. Thomas Whaley was not ready to give up and continue to live in his home. In 1871, when Thomas was away on a business trip, a group of armed men held Anna Whaley at gunpoint as they seized the courthouse records from the house. Many believe this marked a turning point for both the Whaley family and the house itself. Over the years, several descendants of the Whaley family, including Thomas, Anna, their children Lily and Thomas, and later Violet and Francis, lived and died in the home. During its various restoration periods, workers and visitors began to experience strange sounds and encounters. The most famous ghost said to haunt the house and grounds is that of Yankee Jim Robinson, a notorious criminal who was executed on the very spot where the house was later built. His spirit is said to make eerie noises, leave loud footsteps, and even leave disembodied footprints, continuing to unsettle family members throughout the years. Moving on to the next mystery. Who was Mona Lisa? Many have long speculated about the identity of the woman depicted in Leonardo da Vinci's famous painting. While some experts argue that she is a purely imaginative creation of da Vinci's, there is compelling evidence suggesting that she was, in fact, a real person from his time. Dr. Mandeep R. Mehra, a physician from Boston, made an intriguing diagnosis, suggesting that Mona Lisa may have had a rare glandular condition. He based this on the unusual details of her face, her complexion, thinning hair, and the asymmetry of her smile, confirming this alongside the bulge in the painting that shows a small fleshy bump in the corner of her left eye and her lack of eyebrow hair. It became obvious that the person was suffering from genuine illness that ultimately translates into Leonardo da Vinci painting a real person suffering from this rare condition. This led researchers into believing that though many have theorized Mona Lisa was a female portrait of Leonardo da Vinci himself, that the painting could have been an old commission piece that was rejected by a 24-year-old woman named Lisa Maria di Gherardina, an Italian noblewoman born in Florence back in 1479. There is still debate on who the woman in the painting could be, but no doubt that the portrait was a recreation of a woman and not that of a made-up and imaginative realistic creation. Theories still surface every year as to who the Mona Lisa could be depicting, but it appears to be a mystery of which we may never get a definitive answer to. Moving on to the next mystery. The mystery of the Sphinx claws in Israel dates back to the 1950s when a pair of stone claws were discovered near Tel Hazer in northern Israel. These claws are thought to have belonged to a larger Sphinx statue, similar to the one uncovered in Tel Hazer in 2013. However, the original location of the Sphinx from which these claws originated remains a mystery, leaving researchers puzzled about its origins and purpose. It is possible that the statue was destroyed or dismantled at some point in history, and the pieces were scattered. Another theory is that the Sphinx was brought to Israel from Egypt as part of an exchange of gifts or diplomatic relations. It is believed that during the Late Bronze Age, around 1500 to 1200 BCE, there was significant contact and trade between the kingdoms of the Eastern Mediterranean, including Egypt, Canaan, and the Hittites. The Sphinx claws are currently on display at the Israel Museum in Jerusalem, where they continue to intrigue and fascinate visitors. Their mysterious origins add to the allure of the ancient world and the many enigmas that continue to captivate historians and archaeologists. Moving on to the next mystery. The mysterious case of Ray Gricker involves the disappearance of Ray Frank Gricker, an American attorney and district attorney of Centre County, Pennsylvania, who served from 1985 until his sudden disappearance in 2005. On April 15, 2005, Gricker vanished under unexplained circumstances, and there has been no communication from him since. Before his disappearance, he contacted his office to inform them that he was heading to the Brush Valley region, located northeast of Center Hall, but he was never heard from again. Following Grigar's failure to return home, Furnicola reported him missing late that evening. The next day, investigators located Grigar's Crimson Mini Cooper in the parking lot of a local antique store in Lewisburg. The vehicle housed his county-issued mobile phone, but it did not include his laptop computer, keys, or personal wallet. Investigators found no indications of malicious intent. According to police and family members, the vehicle's position, next to two bridges across the Susquehanna River, had resemblances to the placement of Gricker's older brother Roy's vehicle when he took his own life in 1996. Subsequent to the identification of Gricker's vehicle, officials conducted a thorough search of the river and its banks, but were unable to locate any trace of him. Law enforcement officials also saw that the conduct of a sniffer dog in the vicinity of Grigar's vehicle indicated a possibility of his entering another vehicle with another individual. Pennsylvania officials commissioned the FBI to examine Grigar's bank accounts, credit card information, and cell phone records, but were unable to discover any indications of his whereabouts. The county-issued laptop belonging to Grigar was found by fishermen in the Susquehanna River, beneath a bridge between Lewisburg and Milton on July 30th. However, the hard drive of the laptop was not found. Divers conducted a thorough search of the river area in close proximity to its discovery during the following days, but were unable to locate any further objects. Approximately 2 months later, a hard drive was found on the banks of the Susquehanna River, approximately 100 yards or 91 meters away from the laptop's whereabouts. Investigators speculated that it had originated from the laptop, but it was severely damaged. Despite extensive analysis by the FBI, the U.S. Secret Service, and the data recovery company Kroll on Track, no retrieval of any data was made. In April 2009, Bellefonte police disclosed that prior to Gricker's disappearance, someone individual had accessed the home computer at the residence he cohabitated with for Nicola and conducted online searches on subjects, including how to corrupt a hard drive, how to sabotage a hard drive, and water damage to a notebook computer. In June 2011, Laura, the daughter of Gricker and executor of his estate, filed a petition with Center County to officially declare him deceased. The next day, law enforcement in Utah apprehended an individual who bore a striking resemblance to Griegar on a misdemeanor conviction, but he declined to disclose his true name. A John Doe found in Utah was believed by some to resemble Ray Gricker, with similar features such as stature, weight, lips, and certain wrinkles, sparking speculation that Gricker had been found. Authorities sent Gricker's fingerprint duplicates to Utah for comparison, but the prints did not match. Despite the striking similarities, the man's identity was eventually determined to be someone else. With no trace of Gricker after 6 years and no evidence of his whereabouts, the case remains an unsolved mystery. Moving on to the next mystery. The U-28 creature is a mysterious entity reportedly encountered in 1915 by the crew of the German submarine U-28 during World War I. According to the crew's accounts, they saw a massive creature with a long neck and a small head, resembling a prehistoric plesiosaur or a sea serpent. This sighting has remained a subject of intrigue, adding to the lore of sea monsters and unexplained encounters in naval history. The creature reportedly measured around 60 feet in length, and its head was estimated to be about 6 feet long. As the U-28 approached the creature, the crew noticed that it had a dark, scaly skin and was covered in barnacles. According to the reports surrounding the creature, the encounter occurred on the July 30th back in 1950 when a German U-boat commander, known as Commander Freiherr George G. von Forstner, wrote a detailed report following his attack against the British steamer, the Iberian, claiming that after the steamer sank, there appeared to be a large aquatic animal described as being approximately 60 to 80 feet in length and similar to that as a large crocodile. The report is quoted as stating the following: "At that moment, I had with me in the conning tower 6 of my officers of the watch, including the chief engineer, the navigator, and the helmsman. Simultaneously, we all drew one another's attention to this wonder of the seas, which was writhing and struggling among the debris. We were unable to identify the creature, but all of us agreed that it resembled an aquatic crocodile, which was about 60 feet long with 4 limbs resembling large webbed feet, a long pointed tail, and a head which also tapered to a point. Unfortunately, we were not able to take a photograph for the animal sank out of sight after 10 or 15 seconds." End quote. Researchers believe reports of the U-28 monster directly matches the whale-eater creatures of centuries-old encounters. Over the past 8 centuries, consistent sightings of a creature known as the whale-eater have been made all across the world, with notable sightings being made well into the modern day. The creature has been described as being an estimated 43 feet in length, having an elongated head, a short neck, a crocodile-like body, for flippers for locomotion, and a short tail. Since 13th century, sailors have claimed fantastic stories of massive sea monsters that are known for hunting down and eating whales of all sizes. Researchers have speculated that the whale-eater is a surviving member of the Pliosaurus marine reptile species that was estimated to have gone extinct about 65 million years ago. With its crocodile-like appearance, the whale-eater would more than accurately fit the description of the pliosaur and would explain the large number of sightings made throughout history. Additionally, on August 13, 2012, a 65-foot whale was found beached on the sandy coast of St. Austell. Before efforts could be made to assist the whale, the creature suddenly passed away. When experts analyzed the whale, they found that there were deep gashes all across the creature's face that looked eerily like a massive single bite mark, with the teeth like punctures curving evenly into a U shape across the whale's entire face. One of the reports was quoted as saying the following: "Based on the photographic evidence, a creature with huge, long, crocodile-shaped jaws lined with big, sharp teeth attacked the whale." Many theories have been proposed to explain the U-28 creature, including the possibility that it was a misidentified whale or another known sea creature, but its true identity remains unknown. The encounter has sparked much speculation and continues to captivate researchers and enthusiasts alike, becoming a popular topic of discussion for those fascinated by the unknown and unexplained phenomena. Moving on to the next mystery. On June 15, 2012, James Dutton, a United States Coast Guard veteran, went on a short day trip to the Three Sisters Wilderness area near the French Peak trailhead. However, he suddenly disappeared without a trace. Tragically, his family did not know he was missing until nearly 2 weeks after the incident, and the search for him would not begin until much later. According to the official missing persons report, James Dutton was scheduled to pick up his nephew at the Portland International Airport on the June 28th for a week-long trip to the Three Sisters Wilderness. Although the family would attempt to contact James prior to the flight to help confirm the pickup time, they were frustrated to get no response. Believing that James had merely been too busy to respond back, the nephew would end up at the Portland International Airport on 28th, waiting for James Dutton to arrive. Oddly enough, after several hours and over a dozen missed calls, James would fail to appear at the airport, prompting his immediate family to perform a welfare check. In the late afternoon of June 28th, James' brother, Chris Dutton, would arrive at Jake's apartment to figure out what exactly was going on with his brother's absence. According to the Dutton family, it was incredibly uncharacteristic of James to ignore everyone's calls and to fail to show up for an important task. Given his history working in the United States Coast Guard, James had grown up to be one of the most punctual members of the family, as well as being consistently reliable. However, once Chris would arrive at James' apartment, it would become even more difficult to understand what was going on. Using a spare key to enter, Chris found that James' camping equipment had been prepared for the nephew's trip, as if he had had all of the equipment packed up and ready to be put into his truck to leave immediately. After getting a hold of James' calendar, Chris was also surprised to see that James had placed several reminders and a complex itinerary of activities he had planned on enjoying with his nephew for the 28th. Discovering the calendar and the prepared equipment, it seemed highly unlikely that James had merely forgotten about the event. After searching the apartment and garage, it became apparent to Chris that something terrible must have happened to James, as he and his truck appeared to have been missing. After waiting several more days in the hopes that James would return, but finding no sign of the missing brother, the family would then contact the Eugene Police Department to report James Dutton as a missing person. Unfortunately for investigators, it would not be until July 9th, more than 10 days since Chris Dutton would perform a welfare check, that a missing persons report for James Dutton would be filed. Unsure of where James could have ventured off to, the family was forced to wait another 3 weeks before any news on James's whereabouts would reach them. On July 30th, a United States Forest Service agent discovered an abandoned 1998 blue Nissan pickup truck that was found near the Mackenzie Pass, next to the French Peak trailhead of the Three Sisters Wilderness National Park. After discovering the abandoned vehicle, the United States Forest Service would then contact the local authorities to discover if any reported missing persons had a matching vehicle anywhere in the region. After only a few minutes, the connection with the vehicle to the case of James Dutton would be made, and the United States Forest Service, working alongside the Eugene Police Department, would immediately begin a search and rescue operation for James Dutton over the course of the following week. After the first day, the United States Forest Service was able to confirm with the registered wilderness permits that James had first arrived in the area on June 15th, more than a month and a half before the search efforts began. Given the fact that James Dutton's permit was expected to lapse on June 18th, investigators considered this date to have been the earliest possible date to consider James as officially missing. Family members and detectives handling the case of James Dutton would express both frustration and suspicion at the bizarre handling of James Dutton's wilderness permits. Had it been the case that James had registered with the wildlife park for only 3 days, it seemed unexplainable that the park officers would not have begun a search for James much sooner, as he had failed to register when leaving after 3 days. For those that are unfamiliar with the function of the wilderness permits, United States national parks require hikers to register with the local park administration to receive permits that allow travelers to stay for only a limited amount of time. Many parks will issue permits lasting only a few days to a couple weeks that alert a hiker when they must leave the park to make room for additional guests or tourists. Although hikers can have their permits extended, If a wilderness permit lapses and the guest has not yet left the park officers must ensure that the guest is not overstaying their welcome. Given the fact that all hikers must register with the administration when leaving the park at any time, the wilderness permits are a great way to keep track of how many guests are in attendance and when a guest should be searched for. In many cases, the permits also act as a guarantee contract, which will lapse if a hiker leaves the national park and must purchase a new permit if wishing to re-enter, even if the original permit has not yet ended. It becomes incredibly difficult to explain then why it was that not a single search and rescue effort was called during the days following James Dutton's failure to register. Regardless of this strange oversight, search efforts for the missing hiker James Dutton would continue from the July 31st to August 5th. Several dozen hikers and local residents would also join the search efforts, alongside professionally trained canine search teams and retired members of the United States military. However, as the search efforts continued, detectives began to wonder whether or not it was truly the case that James had gone missing due to an accident, or whether something far more nefarious was responsible for the bizarre facts surrounding the case. The first strange fact appeared to be that none of James' belongings were missing, with the majority of items left inside the truck as if they were untouched. Additionally, when camping or fishing, James typically stayed within a short radius of his truck and was incredibly familiar with the area. It was difficult to understand how it could have been that no sign of James was found even after weeks of his disappearance and the equipment of his truck, making it appear as if he had vanished within only a few minutes of his arrival in the area. Desperate for answers, family members and detectives would help put out several local articles, asking hikers who had been in the region around the time James Dutton had arrived if they had seen or talked with James to get a more accurate picture of where he could have been or what could have happened. However, despite the park having been at one of its busiest times, not a single hiker or tourist would come forward with information about James Dutton. On the August 6th, official search and rescue efforts would end, and the investigation into the Dutton disappearance would be handed over to Eugene Police Detective Jeff Donaga. For the official record, Detective Donager would later share his opinion claiming that he did not believe Jake disappeared due to an accident or voluntarily, and was actively pursuing an investigation suspecting foul play. Due to the public backlash on the part of the park failing to begin search and rescue efforts after the expiration of his wilderness permit, on August 15th, local newspapers would publish a public statement from the wilderness park officials claiming that permits are not used to keep track of individuals overstaying their welcome, but were instead used to help estimate the expected traffic in the area, a contradictory statement to park policy. In August of 2016, it was announced that James Dutton's remains were found in a steep, densely wooded area within the Three Sisters Wilderness. Remarkably, this wilderness area has the highest number of reported missing persons cases in the country, with disappearance rates far exceeding those typically seen in other national parks. Moving on to the next mystery. For many years, the existence of the Canaanites was dismissed by some as a myth, with their presence in the region largely considered to be unsupported by historical evidence. However, recent discoveries of Canaanite skeletons and DNA analysis have provided tangible proof of their existence. These findings, from ancient burial sites in the region, have allowed researchers to trace the Canaanite lineage, linking it to historical records and genetic markers that confirm their presence in the Promised Land. This has opened new doors for understanding the early inhabitants of the region and the biblical accounts surrounding them. And so the validity of the biblical story was seen as a more symbolic message rather than a literal one. Oddly enough, back in July of 2017, scientists announced the discovery of 3,700-year-old skeletons in the region that predated many of the original inhabitants believed to have existed. These skeletons, after using DNA analysis, were believed to be the Canaanite people and appear to be a direct ancestor to those living in Lebanon, Jordan, and Syria. Not only does this find help to more accurately map out the history of tribes and humans all throughout the region and the timelines associated with them, but has proven to give an incredible amount of validity to biblical history, which has caused a complete shift in the reference of these scriptures. This could very well mean that using these ancient scriptures, more information could be uncovered about this lost tribe and many other inhabitants of the distant past. Moving on to the next mystery. The lost land of Punt, often referred to as the land of the gods by ancient Egyptians, has long captivated historians and archaeologists due to its elusive nature. Ancient Egyptian texts describe Punt as a prosperous and exotic land, rich in resources like gold, frankincense, myrrh, and ebony, which were highly valued in Egypt. Expeditions to Punt were recorded, with the most famous being that of Queen Hatshepsut during the 15th century BC, who sent a large trading mission there. Despite these detailed records, the exact location of Punt remains a mystery, with theories ranging from the Horn of Africa, modern-day Somalia, to parts of the Arabian Peninsula, or even further afield. Archaeological evidence of Punt remains scarce, and its true geographical position continues to elude researchers. The search for Punt has sparked debates and theories for centuries, and its discovery could offer significant insights into the ancient world and its trade networks. The precise location of Punt is not clear, but it is believed to have been situated in the region of the Horn of Africa, possibly in present-day Somalia, Ethiopia, Eritrea, or Yemen. According to the ancient Egyptian records, Punt was a land rich in gold, frankincense, myrrh, exotic animals, and other valuable commodities. The Egyptians conducted several expeditions to Punt during the Old and Middle Kingdom periods, as attested by inscriptions and reliefs on the walls of temples and tombs. The expedition to Punt was led by high-ranking officials, such as the vizier, the treasurer, or the overseer of the royal harem, and involved a large fleet of ships and thousands of crew members and soldiers. The journey to Punt was long and perilous as it involved navigating the Red Sea, crossing deserts, and negotiating with local tribes and traders. The Egyptians traded with the people of Punt for exotic goods, such as myrrh trees, ebony wood, ivory tusks, leopard skins, and live baboons, among others. The Puntites, in turn, received goods from Egypt, such as linen, beads, metal tools, and pottery. Despite the numerous expeditions to Punt, the precise location and identity of the Puntites remained a mystery to the Egyptians. The Puntites were depicted in the reliefs and inscriptions as having dark skin, curly hair, and wearing animal skins or simple garments. Some scholars have suggested that the Puntites may have been related to the modern-day Cushitic or Semitic-speaking peoples of East Africa or the Arabian Peninsula. The exact reason for the decline and disappearance of Punt is not known, but it is believed to have been due to environmental changes, economic factors, or political upheavals. The legacy of Punt lives on in the Egyptian texts and art, which depict the exotic and mysterious land as a source of wealth and wonder. Moving on to the next mystery. The Vimana is a mythical flying palace or chariot found in Hindu texts. While flying machines are often seen as a modern science fiction idea, ancient Hindu scriptures present a different narrative. According to these texts, Vimana were flying palaces or chariots used by gods and legendary figures capable of traveling vast distances through the air. Described in astonishing detail in ancient scriptures such as the Vedas, Mahabharata, and Ramayana, these vehicles are depicted with features and capabilities that eerily resemble modern aircraft and even spaceships. Some researchers and enthusiasts believe that the accounts of Vimana could be more than just myth. They could be evidence of early UFO sightings, or even advanced technology possessed by ancient civilizations. The word Vimana in Sanskrit generally means a vehicle or craft, and it is most commonly associated with flying machines. These flying machines are prominently featured in several ancient Hindu texts with descriptions that vary in detail and purpose. In the Ramayana, for example, the Pushpaka Vimana is described as a flying palace that belonged to the demon king, Ravana. This Vimana was said to be capable of flying at great speeds and could travel to any place on Earth at the command of its owner. It was large enough to accommodate Ravana's entire court, suggesting that it was not only a means of transport, but also a symbol of power and luxury. Similarly, the Mahabharata, another ancient epic, contains references to Vimana used in battles, where they are depicted as highly maneuverable and equipped with weapons of great power. These texts describe the Vimana as capable of moving vertically, horizontally, and even disappearing from sight, which some interpret as evidence of advanced propulsion systems and cloaking technology. Other ancient texts, such as the Vedas and various Puranas, also mention Vimana, often in the context of divine or semi-divine beings using them to travel between Earth and the heavens. The Samarangana Sutradhara, a 12th-century Sanskrit treatise on architecture, dedicates several chapters to the construction and operation of Vimana, detailing materials, designs, and even instructions for their use. For those who believe in the possibility of ancient UFOs, the descriptions of Vimana in Hindu texts are compelling. The detailed accounts of these flying machines with their advanced capabilities suggest that they may have been more than just products of the imagination. Some researchers theorize that Vimana could have been real, physical machines, perhaps remnants of a lost civilization with advanced technology, or even the result of contact with extraterrestrial beings. One popular theory is that ancient civilizations, including those in India, may have been visited by extraterrestrial beings who shared their technology with humans. The Vimana, according to this theory, could have been advanced aircraft provided by these beings or reverse-engineered by humans who were taught or inspired by these visitors. The notion that ancient texts might contain descriptions of alien technology is not new, and the Vimana are often cited as key evidence in this argument. Supporters of this theory point to the precise descriptions of the Vimana's capabilities, such as the ability to fly at great speeds, hover, and travel vast distances, characteristics that align with modern descriptions of UFOs. They also highlight the fact that these texts were written 1,000 of years ago, long before the invention of aircraft, suggesting that the knowledge of such technology must have come from an external source. The Pushpaka Vimana, as described in the Ramayana, is perhaps the most famous of all the Vimana. This flying palace, which originally belonged to Kabura, the god of wealth, was taken by Ravana and later used by Lord Rama to return to his kingdom after defeating Ravana in battle. The Pushpaka Vimana is described as a magnificent vehicle, capable of flying through the sky at the speed of thought, guided by mental commands rather than physical controls. The description of the Pushpaka Vimana includes intricate details about its construction and features, such as its ability to expand and contract, its luxurious interiors, and its smooth, silent flight. Some researchers believe the Pushpa Vimana may not be purely mythical, but an actual aircraft powered by advanced technology, now lost to history. Moving on to the next mystery. Ask Audrey Heron's friends and family to describe her, and you'll likely hear words like vivacious, caring, and spunky. Audrey worked part-time as a nurse at the Columbia Green Long-Term Healthcare Facility, a nursing home in the small Catskill hamlet. Both the staff and residents adored her, and she seemed destined for a career in nursing. In an interview with Crime Watch Daily, Audrey's eldest daughter fondly recalled her mother's deep passion for her work. Outside of her profession, little is publicly known about Audrey's personal life. At 22, she welcomed her first child, Sancha. Later, she married Jeff Heron, the son of a wealthy golf course owner, and together they had 2 more children, Quinn and Katie. Audrey's family and friends generally liked Jeff, and Sancha remembered him treating her with kindness, never making her feel different despite her biological father still being in the picture. On the night of August 29, 2002, after enduring a difficult shift at work, Audrey left for home at around 11:00 p.m. What happened next remains a mystery. The 31-year-old made her way back to her freehold home, which is roughly 12 to 15 miles from her place of employment, through rain and fog. CCTV footage, recovered in blurry form from Cumberland Farms, shows Audrey leaving the nursing home parking lot and driving west on State Route 23 in the Jefferson Heights neighborhood of Catskill. The vehicle was a black 1994 Jeep Grand Cherokee registered in New York with license plates X233UV. She anticipated to return to Freehold by this path. Sadly, Audrey's voyage is not captured on any additional CCTV, and she never made it home. Jeff called friends and family the next morning in an attempt to locate his missing wife, but no one had seen her. This fact alarmed him, so he called Audrey's stepmother, who worked at the New York State Police Division headquarters. Officers were sent right away to the family's residence and the 31-year-old's place of business. Authorities were led to believe by multiple hints that Audrey wasn't a fugitive who had chosen to go and establish a new life elsewhere. She had abandoned all 3 of her children, to start with. For the final month prior to Audrey's disappearance, her eldest daughter, Sonia, then 10 years old, had been vacationing in Florida with her maternal grandmother. The morning after her disappearance, the 31-year-old was scheduled to see a doctor and was expected to pick up Sancha. Family members said Audrey is a loving mother and don't think she would have moved out without her kids. She also never showed up for her visits with her doctor. If she had intended to go, it would have been strange for her to have made it. Law police used a helicopter and cadaver dogs to aid in the search after Audrey vanished. Officers investigated every building, path, and body of water within a 9-mile radius, as well as her home route and other detour routes she may have taken. The mother of 3 went missing, and she was never recovered. In relation to the case, over 1,000 leads were followed up on, but none of them materialized. Law enforcement was tipped off in 2018 that the 31-year-old's remains was interred on a nearby property. Nothing was discovered despite the fact that investigators used cadaver dogs to search the area on foot and emptied a nearby pond. Jeff, Audrey's spouse, has faced criticism for his actions after her abduction throughout the years. According to officers who spoke with True Crime Daily, Jeff was reasonably cooperative, but they would not go into additional detail. Although he voluntarily submitted to a polygraph test and permitted investigators to inspect the family home, his actions in other situations have drawn harsh criticism. Jeff reportedly declined to assist with the initial search when Audrey vanished. Additionally, he doesn't participate in the fundraisers that friends and relatives still organize to help them search for the mother of 3 more times. There are also unconfirmed allegations that his polygraph tests yielded inconclusive results. Furthermore, polygraph examinations are unreliable in determining the truth, as we have repeatedly stated on the channel. Interestingly, no one has ever been able to explain why Jeff would wish to make his wife vanish. By all accounts, the marriage seemed content, and neither of them appears to have had an affair. Jeff wouldn't have a financial incentive either, since he and his family were already well off. Sancier has expressed her opinion that Jeff avoids speaking with the public in order to keep the kids safe, and other family members have mentioned that he was upset after the kids vanished. However, a few of Audrey's friends have mentioned that they are leery of the father of 2. A local allegation that Audrey, 31, was kidnapped by Russian mob members is the source of another explanation in her case. This is due to the fact that the Heron family's golf course did, at one point, have a silent Russian partner. Local rumor had it that the family owed this unnamed Russian guy a huge amount of money. Thus, in order to make the family pay up, Audrey was kidnapped. Police looked into this idea and even stationed an officer at the family home in case they were the target of a ransom demand. However, the authorities eventually discovered no proof that this was the series of incidents that resulted in her disappearance. The most recent idea on Audrey's case holds that she was the victim of a straightforward accident and that her car and remains are waiting to be discovered someplace in a body of water. This is due to the fact that the region she was traveling in the night before she vanished was dimly lit and highly forested. As previously mentioned, Audrey's car lacked fog lights, and the weather was damp and misty. It's likely that the severe weather and low illumination caused her to get disoriented or visually impaired, and that's how her automobile ended up immersed in a body of water somewhere. Audrey was last seen alive 2 decades ago. Her phone has not been used, her bank account has not been accessed, and her credit cards have not been used in the years since she vanished. Investigators observed that they were unable to connect when they tried to ping her phone. Now that they are now adults, Audrey's daughters Sonia and Katie have both chosen to become nurses. When Sonia talks about her mother, she smiles and recalls their fun times together, including going to dinner and getting manicures, as well as playing video games. Investigators claim that while there are a number of people of interest in the investigation, their identities have never been made public. Jeff Heron has never, as far as we are aware, been identified as a suspect or person of interest. Since Audrey's car has never been found, there may have been foul play in her case. Audrey Mae Heron, age 31, was last seen leaving the Columbia Green long-term care facility for her home in Freehold on August 29, 2002, at approximately 11 p.m. According to the Charlie Project, Audrey Heron was last seen in Cairo, New York on the night she disappeared. At the time, she was dressed in a dark green medical scrub set, a blue turtleneck top, and a yellow gold necklace. She also wore a white metal-faced watch with a white leather band. Audrey is described as a white woman with hazel eyes and dark blonde to light brown hair. Notably, she has a scar covering part of her right thumb and a mole on the inside of her right knee. She stood 5 feet tall and weighed approximately 105 pounds, making her a petite individual. She was known to be a cigarette smoker and may have worn glasses. Her maiden name is Turk, and if still alive today, she would be 51 years old. Moving on to the next mystery. On Sunday, June 12, 2005, after an argument with her parents, Reese and Sherry Parlier, 21-year-old Ashley Parlier walked out of their home in Battle Creek, Michigan. When she failed to return after a week, her family filed a missing persons report. Despite relentless efforts by both law enforcement and her loved ones, Ashley remained missing for over a decade, with no leads or breakthroughs, until 18 years later. The lingering question remained: where had Ashley gone? What ultimately led to the truth about her disappearance? Join us as we unravel the mystery behind this case, which remained unsolved for nearly 2 decades. According to the 2020 census, Battle Creek is home to over 50,000 residents. Known for its parks and historic landmarks, the city fosters a close-knit community where people engage in adventurous activities and recognize their neighbors by name. However, beneath its welcoming facade, Battle Creek has a violent crime rate significantly higher than the national average, raising serious concerns about public safety. This circumstance exacerbated the community's anguish over Ashley Parlier's disappearance in 2005, a case that left the community shocked and in search of answers. Ashley Parlier's parents, Russell and Sherry Parlier, were overjoyed when she was born on October 16, 1983. She was the Parlier family's second child. Her early years suggested that she was a shy little girl. This was less a result of her lack of zest for life and more a reflection of her innate temperament. Actually, Nicole, Ashley's older sister, used to quip that Ashley had an unwavering faith in humans. Ashley attempted to see the best in everyone. She had dark brown eyes and a grin that showed off her slightly misaligned but incredibly charming teeth. She genuinely thought that everyone was just as she had imagined. Kind-hearted, Nicole thought back. Ashley never let her modest mental impairment, which would have made her cognitive abilities comparable to those of a 12 to 14-year-old, to dictate how she lived. Her spirit was robust and forceful. After graduating from Battle Creek High School, which is located in the bustling Northeast Capital neighborhood, she got a job at the adjacent Taco Bell. At that moment, her dreams of owning a car started to materialize with every paycheck. She took out a tiny amount of her earnings, daydreaming of the freedom that owning an automobile would bring. Ashley was full of hopes and dreams, but reality had different plans. The unexpected turns of fate lurked in the shadows, and for someone as trusting and good as Ashley, the world was terribly unprepared to repay her kindness. Nobody realized that she was about to experience a tragic ending that would sap her hope for a better future. Ashley Parlier, who was 21 years old, was 5 feet 9 inches tall and had a slender physique. She weighed little under 100 pounds. For someone of her caliber, every bodily alteration of any size had to be noteworthy. This was especially the case for her devoted parents, who spotted a strange lump on their daughter's body on the fateful day of June 12, 2005. Ashley's extraordinary mental capacity and compassionate disposition caused her parents to first worry about her well-being. Their anxieties were heightened by the possible health consequences, and they were keen to have her evaluated. If Ashley were to become pregnant, they felt that prenatal care was essential. Nobody found the realization, the anxieties, or the conversations that followed easy, Ashley least of all. The tension in the urban community of Bedford Township increased after a violent altercation at the Parlier residence. Ashley hurriedly fled the family home because she was upset. She took very little, but she did have roughly $700 in cash. She lacked a phone, credit card, license, and automobile. Her only choice was to use this money. At first, it was thought Ashley had left because she needed a little vacation to calm down. If you can, try spending a day or two at a friend's place. The Parlier family hung on to this optimism, but the Parlier family began to feel a rising feeling of dread as the minutes grew into hours and the hours into days. The family's optimism gradually turned to fear. Ashley's family was disturbed by every unanswered phone and unwanted knock on the door, which caused the formerly lively home to become silent. As the days passed and their darkest worries began to come true, the Parlier family was unable to wait any longer. They knew something was really wrong, so they made the decision to report Ashley missing to the police. Anxiety and anguish take the place of their expectations. Investigators immediately began to examine into Ashley Parleer's unexplained disappearance. At first, the evidence seems to be sparse. The public was sent an image of Ashley wearing a checkered blouse, blue trousers, and brown leather sandals in the hopes that someone had heard something or seen something that could lead to her location. Ashley Parleer had a unique and remarkable physical appearance, but what was really concerning was how she felt emotionally before she vanished. Her unintended pregnancy, susceptibility due to her mental state, and the major disagreement she had with her family just before her disappearance all contributed to the case's increasing complexity. Ashley was believed to have been saw multiple times in the Houghton Lake area, which was a good lead. The family's temporary despair was lessened by hopes for her safe return. This brief moment of optimism, though, was short-lived since every sighting that was recorded turned out to be a false lead, frustrating both the family and the investigators. Then, because of the delay in reporting Ashley's disappearance, the investigators concentrated on Sherry and Russell Parleer, Ashley's parents, who she was closest to. Suspicion was directed towards her parents. Russell volunteered to take the polygraph exam, which he passed. Sherry declined, stating that she had health problems. Later on, it was revealed that Sherry was showing early symptoms of Huntington's disease. Nicole, Ashley's sister, noted how out of character Ashley's prolonged absence was and how unusual it was for her to act in this way. The family had just assumed she was cooling off at a friend's house after the violent quarrel and had been waiting for her to come home. They delayed alerting the police because of this stupid assumption, which complicated the investigation. While the investigators tried to get in touch with Ashley's former boyfriend, whose identity hasn't been made public, who is believed to be the father of her unborn kid, the circle of distrust expanded. At the time, he was seeing another woman who was also carrying his child. He had not been cleared, but there was no proof that he was responsible for her abrupt disappearance either. As the detectives continued their investigation, they discovered many leads. There are conjectures that Ashley may have had mental health issues. This led the authorities to look for a body gruesomely in an attempt to locate information that would provide some closure, but they found nothing. Ashley was the victim of a theft, according to another notion, but this was refuted by the fact that her social security number remained the same. As each day passed, the grim reality began to set in. The detectives reluctantly concluded that Ashley might have been a murder victim. They had assumed she was dead. Every year that went by, the Battle Creek Police Department's best efforts to solve the case were less and less successful. Throughout the course of 18 years, numerous officers looked into Ashley's mysterious disappearance. They had a number of people of interest, but none of them had concrete proof against them. The case thus became cold once more. Surprisingly, in 2020, there were rumors that Ashley might have been murdered somewhere other than Battle Creek City, which led to the case being turned over to the sheriff's department. Up until 2021, when an unexpected development reignited the case's hopes of being solved, the mysteries seemed to be at a halt. But the hope dimmed with the passing of the years. The trail of leads had become stale, and the once hot case quickly turned into a frozen mystery. Despite the detectives' best efforts, the leads had all but vanished, leaving them in a condition of frigid ambiguity. Again, the inquiry into Ashley Parleer's disappearance had turned up no new clues, no solid evidence, and a ton of unsolved problems. Occasionally, an unexpected burst of information might revive hopes for cracking a long-running mystery inside the intricate network of cold cases. In the Ashley Parleer case, that chance emerged from an unforeseen quarter. Officers were taken aback when they received a call from Calhoun County Law Enforcement in Pennsylvania. In January 2021, it happened that Pennsylvania detectives were questioning Harold David Hallman III, who was 44 years old. Harold was being investigated as a possible serial killer, not just any suspect. This revelation piqued the interest of Ashley's case detectives right away. They questioned such a prominent felon, wondering what information potentially may lead to Ashley's disappearance. Harold David Hallman may not be the first person who quickly comes to mind, but he has a troubled past. Born on November 29, 1978, Harold lived in Germany with his father for a portion of his teenage years. But while his father moved to Turkey, young Harold decided to stay in Germany with a lover. Looks can be deceiving, though on the outside he seemed to be just another young man. Harold was only 20 when he committed his first known murder. Joseph Whitehurst, a 21-year-old Air Force colonel's son, was his victim. Whitehurst's body was discovered outside Ramstein Air Base, having been severely beaten with a club. Harold acknowledged killing him on a different accusation while under German prison. It was self-defense, he said. Harold's advanced age and diagnosis of schizophrenia led to a reduced 6-year sentence and a reformed school. Harold eventually returned to the United States, where he worked as a truck driver and settled close to Battle Creek Lakeview. Around this period, he became entangled in Ashley Parlear's terrible 2005 disappearance. Years later, on June 13, 2018, Tiana Phillips, a mother of 2, vanished. 3 years later, Harold admitted under questioning that he had no intention of killing Tiana Phillips. All he felt was the want to kill. Next up, in 2020, is Erica Schultz, another woman. She vanished on December 6th. Phone records connected Harold to her abduction and murder, and he jokingly likened her murder to an ordinary day at the park. He got hurt while being transported along Pennsylvania railway rails. To Harold, his deeds were sins that needed to be atoned for. In the hospital, he acknowledged that he had killed Phillips and Schultz. He later wrote a letter to his estranged wife while he was incarcerated, detailing his crime against Phillips. This was a cunning attempt to show his wife how devoted he was to her. Interestingly, Harold followed a pattern. After ensuring his victims were unconscious before attacking, he would leave their remains in remote locations. His victims would disappear and suffer concussions. He perpetrated heinous, well-planned crimes. Harold's evil thoughts and deeds had unclear motivations. He was interested in knowing more about serial killers and had developed sophisticated theories on the nature of power. He believed that there is a distinct power dynamic in partnerships, with one person being the dominating one and the other the submissive one. When his spouse was unable to adopt the submissive role, he searched for that dynamic elsewhere. Harold could recollect every detail of his crimes when pressed. With them, he was very familiar. He admitted that he would kill again if he didn't get arrested. Once Pennsylvania detectives looking into the horrifying murders of 44-year-old serial murderer Harold David Hallman III identified 2 of the victims, Deanna Phillips and Erica Schultz. They also uncovered another shocking detail regarding Ashley's case. Harold surprised the officers during questioning when he asked to merge the cases of Parlear, Schultz, and Phillips. He wished to escape multiple trials. The mention of Ashley Parlear surprised the detectives. Her case had not come up in their conversation. Their first bewilderment was replaced by a growing curiosity. Harold may know something about Parlear's disappearance. Upon delving deeper into the Parlear case, investigators discovered an astonishing confession. Harold freely acknowledged his interest in murder. "All I wanted to do was feel it out." To the detectives, he said. He felt that nothing, not even drugs or activities, could match the sense of taking another person's life. His morbid fascination drove him to commit horrific crimes, and his statements painted a picture of someone deeply disturbed. When investigators uncovered his shocking confession, they immediately contacted the Calhoun County Police Department to share the discovery and provide an update on the case. Eager to gather more details, the officers handling Ashley Parlear's disappearance wasted no time in questioning Harold directly. Their follow-up inquiries confirmed that he had a connection to Ashley. According to records, Harold lived in Battle Creek from 2002 to 2009 and maintained contact with Ashley during that period. As investigators dug deeper, they pieced together a chilling timeline. Following the argument with her parents, Ashley had gone to Emmett Township, Michigan, to stay with Harold. She confided in him about her pregnancy and the concerns her family had. Tragically, that visit would mark the end of her story. After a furious fight between the two, he began to attack Ashley. Soon after, he whisked her away to the tranquil, remote hills of Pennsylvania. That's where he then killed her. In some respects, Harold's admission provided closure, even though it also made the tragedy worse. He recalled abandoning Ashley's body in the northern part of Newton Township and discarding his blood-stained clothes. While the questions were being asked, Harold elaborated on his acquaintance with Ashley Parlear. It was evident from his statement that they had first connected at a gathering that her parents had attended. They had a talk as a result of their fortuitous meeting, which paved the way for their eventual closer friendship. He also detailed the events leading up to Ashley's argument with her parents on that pivotal day. Ashley had gotten in touch with him because he seemed like someone she had trusted. not because he had any prearranged intentions. Ashley told Harold about the pressure from her parents to get a pregnancy test when she saw him. The investigators were startled when Harold revealed that he was Ashley's inborn child's father. Nevertheless, things were heated once Ashley revealed that she might be pregnant, and on June 13, 2005, the two got into an argument. Harold went off the deep end during their disagreement. Ashley was knocked unconscious by his violent strikes. Then he drove her to a secluded location, which he described as an overgrown field in Michigan, about 10 miles outside of the town center. This remote spot, with a garage or possibly an abandoned house nearby, was the backdrop for a gloomy tale. Harold remembered the peaceful surroundings and Ashley's still corpse in the back of the automobile, creating an eerie feeling. He had the notion that here was the ideal place to take Ashley's life abruptly, and the fact that no automobiles were passing verified this. He related the story of how, after removing Ashley from the car, he killed her out of wrath so that she would never again be able to live on Earth. Harold then departed for his home and took out all of the proof. Later, at the renowned American supermarket Meijer, where he worked at the time, he disposed of his bleeding clothes. Harold was uncomfortably still interested with Ashley's case after that. He admitted that he had visited the site years later and discovered Ashley's skeletal bones. His apologies to the Parlier family came after his admission. Of all the crimes he had perpetrated, he hated Ashley's murder the most, expressing regret for its commission. The police work in the Ashley Parlier case was nothing short of extraordinary. They persisted in their search for information and leads for nearly 20 years in an effort to reunite Ashley with her family in spite of the numerous challenges presented by the case. So when the confession of Harold Holman emerged, the authorities were encouraged. To confirm his claim, they asked him to pinpoint the exact spot where he had left Ashley's remains. For the cops and the prosecution, this was not simply any other case. It required a great deal of time and resources. Many detectives who have been dedicated to discovering Ashley's true story have been involved in the investigation over the years. When the leads from within the city dried up, they expanded their search far beyond its borders. They made contact with possible witnesses and searched a variety of locations across the nation, including California, Maryland, and Pennsylvania, for any leads. The formidable investigating team included Detective Sergeant Chris Suarez of the Michigan State Police, Detective Dave Huminga, and Detective John Pignataro of the Calhoun County Sheriff's Department. With perseverance and teamwork, they finally reached a wooded location 1.5 miles down a 6.5-mile road in Newton Township, south of Battle Creek. There was a lot of searching going on March 30, 2022. For hours, over 24 police officers combed the neighborhood in an attempt to locate Ashley. However, they were not successful. Another layer of intricacy was that, according to locals, Ashley's absence had left the environment substantially altered. Over the years, other owners had purchased and split up what had previously been farmland. Even with the search narrowed down and Harold's admission filled with hope, a major roadblock appeared. After all these years, Harold could barely recall the exact place he'd left Ashley. The landscape had changed over the years due to development, and he had trouble finding the spot. Even if there are no remains to be found, the search for Ashley goes on. In the hopes that the day will arrive, the police are totally dedicated to cracking this terrible case. Harold Holman's trial in relation to Parlier's case proceeded pretty smoothly, given the scope of such investigations. It's important to keep in mind that by the time Harold went on trial, he had already been convicted guilty of the deaths of 2 other women. This appalling record hindered the proceedings. Despite his past crimes, Harold's genuine fear of the death penalty was unexpected to hear. He had been held at the Luzerne County Jail prior to the trial. In February 2023, he made a prudent legal decision by entering a guilty plea to Ashley Parlier's second-degree murder. He accepted the plea as a condition of an agreement with the Luzerne County District Attorney's Office. He had given his permission to assist the Calhoun County authorities in locating Ashley's body. Agreed to assist in the search for Ashley's remains by the Calhoun County authorities. He would be released from the immediate threat of the death penalty in return. During the trial, the prosecution and defense each made their cases. The severity of Harold's offenses was underlined by the prosecution, especially in view of his previous convictions. Harold's defense most likely concentrated on his plea deal and his cooperation with the police, but the most expected testimony was, in a sense, Harold's own. His previous confession was thoroughly investigated, and its relevance was evident, even if no new testimony was mentioned. The end was bound to come. There would be no chance of release for Harold, the guy who had slain several people. Rather, he would serve 2 life terms in addition to a life sentence. Harold seems to be nearing the end of his legal adventure, but Ashley's case remains unresolved. The Calhoun County Sheriff's Office is continuously searching for any information that might point to Ashley's remains being found. If anyone knows anything about the case, they can get in touch with the Calhoun County Sheriff's Office directly at 269-781-0880. Their commitment to obtaining the necessary information hasn't changed. The case affected Ashley Parlier's family for nearly 20 years. Her parents, Sherry and Russell, sadly died in 2020, leaving them to never know what had happened to their daughter. Ashley's sister, Nicole, grew increasingly unwell as she uncovered the painful truth. After Ashley had sought refuge with Harold, he had betrayed her. The revelation was devastating. Reflecting on the sorrow and distrust that had plagued her family for the past 18 years, Nicole grieved the fact that her parents were no longer alive to hear the truth. In the midst of her pain, she found solace in forming friendships with the sisters of other victims. United by loss, they chose to honor the memories of their loved ones rather than dwell on the man who had taken them away. Their shared grief became a source of strength. In an interview, Nicole firmly stated, "We're going to remember how good they were." Though Ashley's family now understands the tragic reality, they continue their search for her remains, hoping to bring her home at last. What could have driven Harold to commit such a horrific act? And how did he manage to evade justice for so long? Share your thoughts by leaving a comment. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed exploring these intriguing unsolved mysteries with me. If you found the video fascinating, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to Unsolved Mystique for more deep dives into unsolved mysteries. Your support helps me bring you more compelling content. Leave a comment below with your thoughts or any mysteries you'd like me to cover next. See you in the next video.